at home even though I just arrived. I feel at home because the Social Security Administration has, ever since it was established, been a sort of a special concern of mine. Although by the chicanery of politics, it was not placed in the Department of Labor, where I, of course, thought it should be, I never could quite get over my attachment to the Social Security Administration. And I have watched it and been associated with it with great interest ever since it was established. As a matter of fact, of course, one of the reasons I feel so deeply involved in the Social Security Administration is that even though it was not in the Department of Labor, when it was first established, the Department of Labor had to carry it the way you carry a dependent child. You didn't have any money. That was so...
Perkins was born on Beacon Hill in Boston on April 10th, 1880. It's important to take into consideration her upbringing for the time period. For example, in today's society, parents are more likely to praise their children and point out their strengths, whereas in her time period, she really grew up on picking out their weaknesses and overcoming them. And that was a big influence in her and how charismatic she was. Okay. And her Yankee type upbringing was very blunt. She recalls a time in her childhood where her mother said that she's very ugly and should never wear hats. That as a child, the bluntness of her mother saying that she is not a very beautiful woman, she unfortunately kind of had to use to her advantage later on in her career. She learned that in a male-dominated profession, the way that a woman would get respect would have to be to remind them of their mothers. Therefore, she would purposefully dress in dark clothing, wear scarves and hats to look more motherly so that she could gain the respect of them. When Frances Perkins got to college, she was very interested in literature and philosophy, but she knew her weakness was chemistry and physics, so thus she majored in chemistry and physics until she got her master's in political science at Columbia University. When studying her undergrad at Mount Holyoke, the women there were really taught that because of their sex, they were made to think lower of themselves, but in an ironic way, they took to that and was like, well, then why can't we be heroes if we can overcome this kind of discrimination? What really motivated Perkins to get into the field of work that she did was an instance where she witnessed the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire Factory, one of the most historical fires in American history, where people were actually leaping to their deaths because this factory was on fire and there was no safe way to get out. In the result of this tragedy, she became the task force leader of investigating this, and she found that there were sanitation issues. Exits were locked or blocked. The fire itself, when it erupted, was handled poorly. It states that if the owner had escorted people out in the first 3 minutes of the fire instead of trying to put it out right away, most of the lives could have been saved. When Perkins would dedicate herself to a cause, it was very important to her to give her all, even if it meant sacrificing herself and putting her needs on the back burner to make sure that she could fully give her all to the cause that she was representing.
So the main historical context to take into consideration when talking about Frances Perkins is the New Deal, which was in effect from 1933 to 1939. The New Deal was a series of programs implemented by President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, and it was designed to alleviate the suffering of the Great Depression. Frances Perkins was appointed to Secretary of Labor by FDR in 1933 and was a major contributor to the structure and implementation of the New Deal. She was the first female member of the presidential cabinet, and the New Deal implemented various agricultural, social, and financial programs that later took a very anti-corporate stance, leading to one of the most progressive income taxations in U.S. history, taxing some of America's richest citizens up to 75% on income. Perkins was responsible for the implementation of the 40-hour, 5-day workweek and was a promoter of workers' rights. Overall, Franklin Delano Roosevelt noted that most of the programs established during the New Deal were intended to be temporary and not permanent, thus providing a foundation for later social measures.
Well, hello there. Are you here to learn about Frances Perkins? Well, let me tell you. It was 1933. Damn, what a time to be a woman in American politics. And it's all thanks to that fantastic Frances Perkins. In 1933, Frances Perkins was appointed to be the Secretary of Labor for FDR, and that was after FDR and Eleanor had to kind of convince her in order to take the job. But Perkins, the great businesswoman that she was, basically told FDR, look, I'll only do this if you're planning on backing up my ideas. You see, it was a huge boys' club in the White House at this time. However, if Perkins hadn't advocated for herself, today we wouldn't have federal aid, public works programs, federal laws of minimum wages and maximum hours, unemployment, old age insurance, abolishment of child labor, federal employment insurance, or even Social Security. Just a few things you might actually want. However, just because she was able to get those things through the legislature, it doesn't mean that there wasn't any pushback. Many labor and business leaders were completely outraged that there would be a woman in the president's cabinet. Contempt for Perkins just continued to grow as she reorganized the Department of Labor and the Bureau of Immigration and Naturalization, which was super corrupt at the time, and it was thought to be an agency of taking bribes and illegal deportations. As a result, the House of Un-American Activities Committee tried to impeach her for communistic activities. Funny, they dropped the case because they found absolutely no evidence. Just another example of men feeling uncomfortable about a woman wanting to make changes. Perkins served as secretary for 12 years under the Roosevelt administration, which is longer than anyone else who's ever held that position. After her resignation, she became the head of the U.S. delegation to International Labor Organization Conference in Paris. Later, President Truman appointed her to the Civil Service Commission, which is a government agency that advocates that federal employees be hired on their merit rather than just their relationships with who they know in politics. Once again, Perkins was going to reform the American government. Finally, Perkins became a professor at Cornell University's School of Industrial and Labor Relations. She wanted to inspire youth who shared similar passions for maintaining fairness, safety, and security in the American workforce. I think the best quote that summarizes her is when she said, "The only time being a woman has ever affected me is when I wanted to climb trees." And everybody loves to climb trees. I truly believe that the accomplishments of Perkins during her political office greatly influenced the way that women were looked at in American politics for the next several years. So now, go out and go forth and tell everyone about the fantastic Frances Perkins and how she completely changed the way that you can do your job.
Oh hey, when I was little, anyone asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up, and I always knew right away. I'm going to be the President of the United States of America, I'd say. I was usually met with good-natured chuckles from relatives and parents, friends, but I was downright serious and no one was going to get in my way. Listening to my grandmother's struggles of her life as a young woman in the 40s and 50s only urged me on until I began to realize how little I knew about the advancements of women and who the powerhouses were who fought for them. After a few months of digging into some research, I came across Frances Perkins, the first female member of the presidential cabinet. She was a civic-minded young woman from a young age and wanted to make a difference for those in poverty and suffering under unfair and often unsafe working conditions. Her influence on the New Deal and her work as a writer covering her political experiences inspired me. I know I have a shot at the kind of future I want because of women like Perkins who are willing to step into responsibilities previously withheld from us. Perkins explained, "The door might not be open to a woman again for a long, long time, and I had a kind of duty to other women to walk in and sit down on the chair that was offered, and so establish the right of others long hence and far distant in geography to sit in the high seats. Whenever a young woman begins to dream big, they're readily discouraged by others who believe it will be too difficult for them or not the right kind of work or achievement for a woman. And I stand against that mentality. I encourage my friends to try anything and everything that interests them and ignites their passion, because they have the right to be a passionate, contributing member of society. Perkins was known for her willingness to compromise and get the job done. So how much can young women accomplish if we just step up to the plate and work as a team? As Perkins says, most of man's problems upon this planet in the long history of the race have been met and solved either partially or as a whole by experiment based on common sense and carried out with courage. Perkins' story gives me courage. I have the courage to continue fighting the good fight and putting out my best work in the face of opposition that one day I can help influence and craft the state of our nation for the better, just like Frances Perkins. Frances Perkins is flawless.
I hear her hat is insured for $10,000.
I heard she wasn't actually ugly, she just faked it to fit in with her male counterparts.
Her favorite movie is Metropolis.
One time, she met Cary Grant on a plane.
And he told her she was a revolutionist.
I heard that she dressed like a mother, so I started dressing like a mother.
One time, she punched corrupt labor laws in the face. It was awesome.